Cool. So let's begin.
I'm ready.
All good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this segment of QABC. In this section, we're going to talk a little about the importance of accessibility and how to run a Lighthouse audit on accessibility. And also, we've got the Alex Captain here to do some demonstrations and what tools you can use for accessibility scores with the workplace as well. Quick introduction. So I'm Chris Forsyth. I'm a QA at Music Magpie. Been a tester for about 3.5 years, 4 years now, and co-founded with Tracy Kerr just over a year ago now QABC. Where QABC is obviously QA Beginners Club. We're here to help people get into testing if they want to look at career paths and also getting the foot in the door as well. So that's a little bit about me. Alex?
Yep. Hi all, I'm Alex Clapperton. I am a front-end software engineer at Cinch. I've been there for a little over, I think 3 or 4 weeks now, so I've not been there very long. And then prior to that, I had the privilege of working alongside Chris and Tracy at Code Computer Love, where I was there for the best half of 3 and a bit years. And one area that I like to specialize in with regards to front end is accessibility. So hence why I'm here today to basically go through some handy little tools that you can use to check basically whether a web page is as accessible as possible. So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Accessibility. Why is it important for websites to have accessibility? So this is going to be the first part of our section on this. So, law, the accessibility requirements. So your service or your website must be accessible to everyone who needs it. If it isn't, you may be in breach of the Equality Act 2010. So yes, even though some people don't think accessibility on websites are important, it's very, very much, it's not just for the people who want to use it, but also by a law as well. So websites should also meet the level of AA of the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, or WCAG, as it's also known as, 2.1, which is a minimum. Also, there is 2.2, but I don't think that's coming until later next year, I believe, Alex.
Yep, that's correct.
See, I do know my stuff. Also works on most common assistive technologies such as screen readers, screen magnifiers, and speech recognition tools as well. So, well, I can stop saying so at the beginning of my sentences. Lighthouse audit. First of all, what is Lighthouse? Lighthouse is an open source automated tool for improving the quality of web pages. These audits include performance, progressive web app, best practices, SEO, search engine optimization. The most important one we're going to be looking at is accessibility. Lighthouse is also regarded as, I would say, a non-functional testing tool because it's non-functional. You're not testing a functionality, you're just testing that it runs right. Way of putting that, if it's nodding, so I know I'm.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, how to run a Lighthouse audit? So pick your web page, any page that you like. So I went for Music Magpie. This is a good example. So for this, you'll need to open up your DevTools or Inspect, as it may be known as, or even some people actually call it just F12. So this is F12 on your keyboard, or Control, Shift, and I, or right-click and then select Inspect as highlighted on here. Then how to run a Lighthouse audit. So there are several processes for this. So along the top you have some options, and one of them being, as you can see highlighted here, is Lighthouse. So this you'll need to select this. Second part is to select accessibility from the menu. You also have the other options here: performance, progressive web app, best practices, and search engine optimization. But again, we're going to be using this part. You've also got 2 functions as well: device and desktop. So this will run how a web page will act on mobile, and also then how a web page will act on desktop. And for this purpose, doing it just pretty for desktop to make things easier for this demonstration. Once you've selected these, select on Generate Report. But then the background will sort of darken a little bit or go a little bit lighter. And then you see this little pop-up, which is the audit actually running. So this could, depending on the website itself and how many reports you're generating, it could take seconds or maybe up to a few minutes, but normally less than a minute, I would say, because if I remember the first time using Lighthouse a few years ago, it took several minutes, but now it's like, well, it's less than a minute to now run everything. So yeah, it's vastly improved. So once the Lighthouse audit has run, you'll be presented with this little page. So you'll be then given your accessibility score, which is out of 100. So our website is currently at 77 out of 100. Not great, but definitely room for improvement, and it's not the worst score I have seen at all. So, which is good.
Yeah.
And under all of this as well, you also have hints and tips how you can actually improve your website. This is where, once you've run this report, you would pass this information over to your developer, maybe front-end developer, and go, right, this is what we can do to make the website better. So what I'm going to do is one I should have made earlier, but I closed the window down. Again, I'm going to do a quick demonstration. So you can see here is my website. Right click, inspect, Lighthouse. Oh, yep, what I made earlier. Generate report. We got some background music, like a lift elevator. There we go. Oh, scored 77. It came back with the original one. Perfect. You see how quick that report was as well. I think even Alex can clarify. Back a couple of years ago, you'd probably still be here waiting for that report to be done.
Yeah. Lighthouse audits have definitely improved over time, and they always, and it always will do. I'm sure this will get faster as the people from Google iterate on this.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a real simple and handy tool to use for sure.
First thing, it's free. That's the great thing about it. Exactly it. Sometimes the best things in life are free. So as I mentioned before, so you have all the little indications of how things can be improved. But I will let Alex in his later demonstrations show on the Pa11y Dashboard and the wave that he's going to be showing later. This actually is a little bit of problem for me. So that's why Alex is the expert on it. But all in all, that is how you run a Lighthouse report. If you want to save this, you can do. Move us out of the way. I normally would go with print expanded. So you can actually save this report so it actually highlights everything out. Save as PDF, save it to wherever you like, and then you can send it on again to wherever you like, and they'll actually see all the drop down, which is actually a nice little.
Yeah.
That's that done. Now so all in all about accessibility, you ask yourself again, what are the benefits of improving your accessibility score, should I say? So here's a few little case studies. So Tesco's, and this is actually going back a fair few years when accessibility was still not even thought about. When they actually invested in improving their accessibility, revenue from site sales increased by 13 million annually. I think the original report still is still in the millions, but again, it's not as high as it used to be. But again, there's to improve now, which is actually good because they've actually invested so much time to actually do this. Yeah, anyone can access the site. And also in pre-Christmas orders back in 2001, there was increased items per week, 700,000 per week, and an average spend of £95. £95 times 700,000, whatever that number is. Also legal and illegal in general. Within 24 hours, natural search engine traffic saw a 25% increase, eventually growing to 50%. Again, this is along with search engine optimization. I'll come on to a little bit as well. Improvement on Google rankings for all target keywords. Again, that's not accessibility, that's again search engine or some SEO. Reduction in maintenance costs. So the better your site runs, the less time you have to invest in actually making it better. So you actually are saving money internally as well. Site visits, receiving quotations doubled within 3 months. More revenue, potential revenue coming in. And also there was 100% return on investments in 12 months. So they got their money back basically, and more tenfold as well. However, there is also a little naughty list, and there are some big hitters on this as well, which you probably wouldn't have expected. So actually web-based heavy, and just mention, as I did before, please ignore QABC in the corner. We are not part of that list. It's just a logo. So I have to say we're not part of this because we actually don't have a website yet. So space.
One for the future.
Future. Oh, Alex, you're busy. Anyway. So
yeah.
We've got high-profile companies, which include Amazon. In 2018, were not compatible with screen readers and refreshable Braille displays. Burger King, again in 2018, had redundant links that caused navigation issues and repetition for users of screen readers. Nike, or Nike, I think it's now officially made. It's actually pronounced Nike, not Nike.
Nike.
It's Nike. It's Nike.
Yeah, I prefer Nike. I always say Nike, but it is Nike.
Is it like? Anyways, that's that for that session. I'll send out a link for that. So in 2017, 2018, that brand didn't conform to WCAG 2.0 requirements. Their websites avoided using alt text and didn't provide alt text equivalents for every element on the page. This include, like, for a prime example is, so if I hovered over this, an alt tag should say Amazon logo or something like that, so someone who was visually impaired could actually know what the image was. And McDonald's failed to accommodate for visually impaired on their websites. And in 2012, Netflix failing to provide adequate closed captions on watch instantly doing video programming. So you think, again, it's only 8 years ago, but they were still big, and they are still a big company at the time. But again, they've now improved on that. And I think, again, their revenue has gone down for actual investments to improve their website. So exactly, for £1 you put in, you get a tenner back.
Yeah, and actually, just to add on that, like, just following the basics of accessibility, so like making sure your headings are in the correct order, making sure that images have alt text, just simple things like that, it helps other areas of your website. So for example, it helps improve SEO.
Exactly.
So basically, just following the basics can really help not just improve accessibility, but improve other areas as well. And morally, it's the right thing to do. There are some people out there who consider accessibility as an afterthought when it should be integrated into everything that we do. And really, people have been sued for not having an accessible website. So for example, I read an article a couple of years back about a company in the US called Winn-Dixie's, who were sued by someone who couldn't basically navigate their website through a screen reader or through a keyboard. And they ended up taking Winn-Dixie's to court, and Winn-Dixie's ended up having to fork out $250,000 to make sure that their website was accessible. So, there have been big companies out there that have been sued over this. So it's just a way of kind of saying how important it is to make sure that a website is accessible, because we should be building stuff that anyone can use.
Exactly. Was it Domino's quite recently as well?
There was,
they were sued a lot of money. So
that's true.
It was only something like 30,000 they needed to invest dev time to improve their accessibility. Kind of went, nah, they got to for like $500,000
they
or
refused,
something ridiculous like that.
I think they refused to actually make their site accessible. I'll see if I can find an article that we can attach.
I remember that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had a dig friend. I can't find it, but I know that story was floating around quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So again, so are you willing to invest dev time of £30,000, which real world times isn't actually that much?
No.
And then, but then to be sued $500,000 plus your legal fees on top of that as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
No.
So on that note as well, so the WCAG guidelines 2.1. So these come down to 5 categories. So there's perceivable, which is again text alternatives and being adaptable. Operable, which is like keyboard accessibility, sizability, and also physical reactions. Understandable, which is readable and predictable. So kind of like what we have on your folder is predictive text. Robust, being compatible. Conformance is non-interface and statements. And yeah, that's the 5 categories. And also I will send this link out well onto our meetup group and Slack channel as well, because this will have all the links. So we have direct links to there to the WCAG website, which give you a lot more information. So I cannot cover it in this because it's about, if you put it in pages, that's a tree. It's a lot. Again, like I said, it's all common sense, easy things to do. And mention it, Alex, I shall hand over to you.
No worries. Let me share my screen. Oh, it says the host disabled attendee screen sharing. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm not allowed to screen share.
I'm sorry.
That's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I thought
I was your friend.
Now, if you now request.
Where's request? I don't see your request. All I see is share screen.
Front share screen, and it should pop back up.
It still says host disabled attendee screen sharing. You let me down.
Sorry,
Thought I was your friend.
Try again. That should now work.
Hey, there we go. Right then.
Friends again.
Right, let's make sure I choose the correct screen. So let's choose desktop 1. Can you see that screen, Chris?
Did I can?
Perfect. So Chris went over the Lighthouse audit tool that you could use to check whether a web page was accessible, but there are many other tools out there, some more advanced than others. One tool that I have used quite a lot, especially when I worked at Code Computer Love, was a monitoring tool known as Pa11y Dashboard. And it's essentially a dashboard where you can check against a bunch of URLs of your choosing, and you can check to see how accessible that web page is. You can set it up so that you can get this dashboard to run automatically at any given time of your choosing. So for example, you could say, I want this dashboard to run against these web pages once every 3 days, for example. You can also use it to track any changes that have happened to a web page over time. So for example, let's say I go on a web page that has some accessibility, some issues around the images not having alt text. Pa11y would pick that up. You would get your developer to go around and fix that. You would once that fix has then gone live, you can run Pa11y again, and it will then obviously show that there's no issues regarding the images not having alt text, and it will keep a history of that, so you can go back and have a look at how accessibility on a web page has progressed over time. And it's also useful for non-developers to see how a site performs, essentially. The only downside is that it does need a little bit of setup, so you will need a developer to basically set this dashboard up for you, because it requires setting up a database and trying to figure out how to store all the tests that are ran in that database. So what I'm going to do is give like a brief demo of how the dashboard works. So if I move over to my other screen, can you see the screen, Chris? Perfect. So basically, as soon as you get a dashboard set up, this is the first thing you'll see. It'll be like a blank canvas. There's nothing really exciting going on here. So the first thing that you'll want to do is click this lovely square, which is called Add New URL. And I'm going to use the Kayak website as an example. The first field is the name. Now this could be whatever you want it to be. Try and name it something relevant. So because I'm testing the Kayak homepage, I'm going to call it the Kayak homepage. Next bit is the URL. So obviously paste in the URL that you want to test against. In this case, we're testing against the Kayak website. The next section that you want to choose from is which standard you want Pa11y to run against this URL. So I'm just going to go with WCAG AA just as a base point, because in my opinion, all sites should be at least level AA compliant. These next couple of fields are more for developers. So I will skip past these two. Task actions. Now, what you can actually do is you can actually get Pa11y to, when it's doing a test against a web page, you can get it to perform certain actions. So for example, let's say you've got a form that you've got on a web page and maybe you want to fill some of those form fields in. You can actually get Pa11y to fill in those fields for you. I'm not going to go into depth with that today. There is some documentation on the Pa11y repo on GitHub, which will go through that in more detail. The next bit is, let's say the web page that you're testing against is protected by HTTP auth, which normally requires a username and password. You can obviously bypass that by actually inputting in the credentials that you need to gain access to that web page, which is pretty handy if you've got like a test environment, for example. So let's say you wanted to test a change that has happened on a test environment before it goes live, you can do so. I'm going to skip a few of this next bit with regarding HTTP headers, because again, this is more for your front-end developers. The next bit is hiding elements. So you can actually choose to hide specific elements on a web page that maybe you don't really want to test or that you feel will give you false results. So an example could be, let's say a web page is loading in a third-party script that adds an iframe to a web page. You basically have no control of how that iframe is going to react and work. So that may give you false results. So what you can do is you can hide that. I will give an example of that actually in a couple of minutes. The last section is you can actually choose to ignore certain rules. So let's say you wanted to run a test against a specific set of rules. So let's say, for example, I only want to run a test against a web page only regarding alt text on images. Then you could ignore all the rules bar the ones regarding images. You could definitely do that. I'm not going to mess around with this section too much. And that's pretty much it. And then you click add URL and you'll get a nice little whoop whoop banner, which will say, great, this web page has now been added and you can now go forth and run a task. And to do that, you can simply run this little link here called Run Pa11y. And then what that'll do behind the scenes, it will go off to that web page, do a scan of it, run some tests, and then come back with some results of how accessible a web page is. So if I go back to the dashboard, we can see that the Kayak homepage test has now run, and we've got some errors, some warnings, and notices. Errors are basically your top priority, like these are big issues, these fail, everything to do with the guidelines set by WCAG AA. So they need like immediate attention and should be fixed pretty much as soon as possible. Warnings are more like Pa11y has tested this and said, yes, this part of the web page is nice and accessible. However, you can maybe improve it a little bit by doing this, that, and the other. And lastly, notices is basically Pa11y saying to you that we've not been able to test this part of the website, so it's going to need some more manual testing. Having said that, manual testing should always be a thing that you should do. Things like Lighthouse and Pa11y and any other tool is great to highlight some key areas that need some workaround, but you'll always need to do some kind of manual testing to like pretty much guarantee to see if a website is as accessible as we want it to be.
Exactly. Well, kind of on that note, like again with Lighthouse being like and kind of being a non-functional testing tool, as it were,
Yeah.
we're still room to say, like, say a new improvement has been put through, like a new click button or something. You can test all that manually to make sure it goes off. Then you can also test it on a screen reader.
Yeah.
That's part of your functional. But again, running like a quick Lighthouse before and after, or Pally, if an error pops up saying, actually, no, this button is increasing the score,
Yeah.
then that's still good. So that's kind of a bit of a difference of like the non-functional and functional testing again, but manual, as we always say, will never be gone.
Yeah, yeah,
It might
that'll
not
never
tucked in
disappear.
there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, once a test is run, you can then go into it to get a bit more information about what's going on. So we'll do that right now. I'll click on the QABC homepage test, and you'll see that we've got in the errors tab that there's a bunch of errors going on. We're going to focus on this one. So this is failing against the guideline to do with buttons not having accessible names. And that basically means that this button doesn't have any text around it to describe what that button does. So for example, when someone's using the screen reader and they focus on this button, all the screen reader will say to that person is button, and that's it. So there's no more information to the user about what this button actually does. So I'm going to click the show details link, and that'll try and give some more information about whereabouts on the web page this button lives. This isn't the most user-friendly, and again, you might need to get a developer to come in and give you some more advice on where this button lives. But I'm going to go in and see if I can try and track down where this button is. So if you actually click on these little bits here, it will bring out a context little tooltip window to try and give you some more information about where this button is on a web page, essentially. So I'm going to focus on this class attribute that's got a trips drawer trigger class on it. So if I copy that, and if I head over to the Kayak homepage, and I bring up my DevTools, what I can do in DevTools is do a find. And as you can see, it's located the button that I'm after. Let's close that because that's in the way. The button in question is to do with this love heart button. And if I open it up, all that's inside it is an SVG. Now, there's no text inside here whatsoever. So again, when someone's using a screen reader, this user's not going to have any idea of what this button does. So a few ways that this can be resolved is that a front-end developer can go in and simply add, well, there's a couple of ways, but one way I would do it is that if you didn't want any text adding inside the button, you can add what's known as an ARIA label. I think I've done that outside. No, that's correct. So basically something along the lines of that. ARIA label, I'm not sure what the love heart does. I'm just going to assume it's like favorites, something like that. Basically, that's one way of resolving that issue. There are some other ways you could actually put some text inside the button, but this is just one way of doing it. So yeah, that's one way of how that could be fixed. Let's move this out of the way. So yeah, that's pretty much kind of how Pally works. Once you do multiple tests over a certain amount of days, what you'll start to see then is you'll see a little graph that will appear at the top of here. So again, this will allow you to go back and like have a look at how accessibility has improved or not improved over a period of time. If you wanted to feed back this information to anyone, you could download this as a CSV Excel spreadsheet file, or if you wanted to get proper nerdy, you could download it as a JSON file as well. And yeah, I think that's it in terms of Pally. One thing I want to mention about how I said before about how you can hide selectors. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. I'm going to add a new URL. And I'm going to add Hillary's website in. So we'll call this Hillary's homepage. Let's spell that right. I'm going to stick with level AA standards, and I'm going to ignore the rest of it. I'll come back to the hide elements bit in a minute. But what I want to do is run a test against this page. And there should be, if I refresh again, there are 3 errors, and they're all to do with an iframe element. So I'm pretty confident that what's happening here is that a third-party JavaScript library or something like that is basically adding in an iframe that we have no control over and is causing some accessibility issues. So I know for a fact that I'm never really going to be able to probably fix this unless I went to the owners of that third-party library and said, look, your iframe that you're embedding on my web page is causing me some issues around accessibility, and you need to fix it. That could take forever to fix. So I only want to focus on areas that I have control over and that I can actually fix. So I want to ignore these iframes. So how do I do that? So I'm going to go back up to the top and click on edit this task. And I'm going to scroll down to the hide elements section. And I'm simply going to put in iframe. And then I'm going to save changes. And if I run this task again, what will happen is that when Pa11y runs, it will ignore any iframe that is added on this web page, because I'm pretty confident that I'm not adding in any iframes myself on this web page. All the iframes that are being added are from third-party libraries. So I'm going to press this cog and click Run Pa11y, and we'll give this a few seconds to run. If I click back to the dashboard, you'll see those errors have now disappeared. So I know for a fact that all the stuff I have control over on this web page now meets level AA standards, which is perfect. And that's pretty much Pa11y in a nutshell. There are some other things that you could probably do, but I'm not going to go into too much detail of them. But I just wanted to highlight the most important features, I would say, of Pa11y Dashboard. And another tool that you could use that basically anyone can use, this doesn't need a developer, pretty much anyone can use this tool. This is known as Wave. It is a web accessible evaluation tool created by a company known as WebAIM. It basically provides visual feedback about how accessible a web page is. So kind of similar to Pa11y Dashboard, but the visuals that it presents back are obviously quite different. And like I said before, it's very useful for non-developers to see how accessible a site is. So if I go back over to this other screen and I go over, let's copy the kayak URL. If I head over to the Wave tool, all I simply need to do is paste in the URL, click enter on my keyboard, and I'll go off and do a test. And you'll see that there is a bunch of errors, some related to color. So basically some of the color combinations that are being used have a poor ratio and aren't really good for people who have visual impairments. You can get some more details around what's going on here by clicking the View Details tab, and it will basically tell you what issues are going on. So apparently on this web page there is an empty heading. That basically means there could be a H1 tag, a H2 tag, H3 tag that basically has no text in it, which is very strange, which also will impact SEO as well. And again, it's also saying that there are 5 empty buttons. So that basically is kind of similar to what Pa11y flagged before, is that there's basically some buttons on here that don't have any names that are accessible. And it will actually highlight the areas on the web page where these issues are coming from. So yeah, Wave is another very handy tool that you can use. There's no setup required. You just paste in a URL and Bob's your uncle, basically. So this is a nice quick way of feeding information back to your developers about certain issues that are happening on a web page. And let's say you wanted to get some more granular information about a certain area of accessibility. So for example, color contrast. There are plenty of tools out there that can do that for you.
There a particular tool, Mr. Clapperton, that's really good.
I'm going to go through 2, but this first one that I'm basically going to mention is one that I created myself. I think like almost 2 years ago now. Time flies. Basically, I made my own color contrast checking tool. You know, and like I say, there's a wide variety of tools out there that can check against color contrast. I'll talk about a second one in a minute. But basically, these tools are there to easily check whether two color combinations are accessible and have a good contrast ratio. So I'm going to briefly demo my color contrast checking tool, which you can basically see for yourself by heading to colorcontrast.cc. And when you navigate, you'll be presented with this web page. And just to highlight a few features, you can enter in two different colors, basically. You can enter in hex code colors. So I'm going to enter in black and white, which is probably like a really good ratio. I think 21 is the highest score you can get for color contrasts. If you don't know hex codes, you can enter in color names. So let's see if I can think of any fancy ones. You've got tomato is a color name, and Rebecca purple, I think, is another one. Yes, and as you can see, that is a dreadful color combination and fails literally everything from AA large to AAA large. So yeah, don't use these two colors. I'm going to go back to black and white. You can also copy the hex codes if you wanted to, so to prove that it copies. You can also play around with the sliders to change the hue, saturation, and lightness. Let's go back to black again. You can reverse the colors, so you can make your foreground your background and your background your foreground. And let's say you wanted to keep like a tab of some color combinations and go back to them later on in time. You can do. You can save these colors and you can then refer back to these at any time in the future. And just for a bit of fun, this really doesn't affect your overall score of your contrast ratio, but I thought it'd be quite neat to add in, is that I've added the ability where you can change the font of the page using some Google fonts. I think these are the 50 most favorited Google fonts. So let's choose Ubuntu, for example. And then inside these little text areas, I can then put in some real life content if I wanted to, just to get a more real life look at how my content will look with these two color combinations. And yeah, that's pretty much it of the web-based version. A few months after I created this, I also went away and turned it into a Chrome extension. So let's go to the Kayak homepage. I've already got it loaded up, so I click on it. It loads up a little window, and this does pretty much everything the web-based version did, bar having some like example copy. But one feature that is on this that isn't on the web-based version is that you can actually pick a color anywhere on the web page that you're on and get some real-time feedback as to whether these two colors work well together. So for my background color, I'm going to choose orange, this orange color. And then from a foreground, I'm going to select this white. And this only passes AA large. So if this was actual white text on an orange background, as long as it was AA large, which I believe is, what is AA large? Off the top of my head, I've forgotten. My color contrast tool will help me with that. So large text is classed as 14 points or 18 pixels. So if the text on here was 18 pixels or larger, that'd be fine. If it was smaller than 18 pixels, then it would fail everything. So yeah, that's I feel like that's probably the best feature of this extension, is that you can pick colors on a web page and get real-time feedback as to whether these two colors work well together. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my tool. Like I said before, there's loads of other tools out there where you can check against different contrast of colors. The one I mentioned earlier was WebAIM. This is where I got my inspiration from to create my own. WebAIM has a fantastic tool to check against the combination of colors. And it pretty much works the same way as my tool. You basically put in some colors. Let's actually put the hash in. Oh, I can't put the hash in. Oh yeah, there we go. So yeah, black, and then we've got white. Can I put color names in? Oh no, I can't. Ah, see, so isn't that smart? But nevertheless, WebAIM is a really great tool to use. You know, it's where I got my inspiration from to create my own. So I recommend you check that out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it from me. So there are just 3 tools of a wide variety of tools that you can use to check how accessible a web page is. And on that note, I will pass you back to Chris. So let's see if I can stop sharing my screen. I've actually forgotten how to stop sharing my screen. Whee. Oh yeah, stop share. There we go. Over to you, Chris. I think you're muted. You're very quiet.
Not like me, but you.
There you are. You're back in the room.
Back in the room. Cool. So I'll come back to the screen. Yes, I'll go. No, thank you very much, Alex. It's always a pleasure to be working with your presentations like this. And again, as Alex could put it better himself, accessibility is so important. It's not just for the users using it as well. It's also great for the company themselves, again, to get themselves up the Google rankings. And again, great for search engine optimization. The small investments can bring back so much. So you can spend £1 and get £10 back. It's, you know, again, it's, you know, makes the world a better place, especially on the World Wide Web.
Yeah,
for everyone to use.
And you know, it's even now for some, you know, it's like I said before, for people that like now still it is an afterthought, and it's a real shame. It should be something that's embedded into everything we do. Because like I said, it improves other areas. It helps to improve SEO, you know, and like morally, it's the right thing to do, you know, and, you know, there is the chance that companies can get sued if a site isn't accessible. So, you know, it should just be embedded into everything that we do. It's just as important as everything else, if not important, if not more important. Sorry.
So I respect that. Again, if Google don't like what you're doing, they can penalize you as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, using like something like Lighthouse and Wave, it gives you it's free, and you can give those reports to your developers, and they can fix them. So if you start like again with the big red errors that are coming in, get those resolved. There's only about 3 or 4. Then get them done. Hopefully, they shouldn't take, as an example, doesn't take that long to actually hit. Then that's your company, your website going up the ranking with minimum effort, and again with a big revenue to come back in.
Exactly.
Cool. So on that highlight, thank you everyone who's watching this. I hope you found it very informative. You can find us on Twitter at at club_QA. That is on Instagram, QABC MCR, and also on our Facebook page, QA Beginners Club. And Alex, is there where we can find you on Twitter?
Yes, I am on Twitter at Alex M. Clapperton. I've not been tweeting on there much recently. I've just been doing a lot of retweets. I feel like I need to tweet more.
And right, yeah, and if you want to follow me, I need to change my Twitter handle. It is at Big Papa Smurf. My defense, I've opened that account years ago. I can't remember when first.
Back in the day.
Back in the day when I had credibility.
Yeah.
So thank you again. Thank you very much. And again, round of applause to Clapperton's demonstrations. Amazing as ever. I hope it's getting again sometime soon. So again, thank you very much everyone for watching, and yeah, peace and take care, people.
Bye everyone.
Bye.